Well, hello. Welcome to another episode of Speaking with Confidence with Kat Matson. It's lovely to have you here. And if you're new to this podcast, this is the show where I coach humble leaders just like you, business owners, public servants, and other fellow corporate hippies, how to speak up and show up authentically so that you can make your dent in the universe, so you can contribute to the conversations that matter to you. And today's episode, I'm talking about probably one of the most common challenges I hear from clients, and that is, how do I get the right words to come out when I'm presenting? So, this particular question or this topic comes from a listener question and also a newsletter subscriber question. Actually, a couple of weeks ago, I put the call out on my weekly newsletter for questions. Who's got a question that they would like me to answer? And this was one of the ones that came back. Now, if you're not already receiving my weekly newsletters, can I highly recommend that? My newsletters generally come out on a Friday. Which day? They come out on a Friday, and I share any events that I'm hosting that are coming up. I will share what I'm observing or what I'm going through myself, and they all have a confidence tip as well. So they're meaningful, they're useful. I know we've got plenty of stuff in our inboxes, but I'd like to think that my email newsletter is pretty good. In fact, I have plenty of people tell me that they read it every single week. So if you're not already subscribed, the link is in the show notes. But anyway, back to the listener question. So I'm going to read it all out because I think the context is important. And Adrian says, I love the podcast. Thank you. And I'm growing in confidence. As much as I prepare myself to aid my confidence, it always feels like the right words won't come out when I'm presenting. Of course, I'm nervous, probably more than most. Can I just step out of that for a second? And no, probably not more than most. Speaking is something that invokes a sense of sheer nervousness in most people. That's why we're here. So, of course, I'm nervous, probably more than most, but I know that presenting clearly is so important. Perhaps it's this thinking that makes it worse. Anyway, I'll do what I can to calm my nerves and tell myself to relax. But what my brain thinks versus what comes out of my mouth is just not in sync. I end up constantly correcting what I said, which completely destroys the message. Either I'm losing my mind, or I just need some advice and skills to be able to switch into gear before presenting. It can be 5 people or 50, but certainly the more people, the worse it gets. I'm going to hazard a guess that Adrian is not the only person listening to this right now who feels this way. And in fact, it's absolutely happened to me too. It doesn't happen to me so much anymore because I have the skills at hand. But it is a perfectly normal response. You're not losing your mind. You're just building some skills. So there are a couple of things that I want to say. First of all, yes, thinking about how important it is will absolutely be making it worse. Take the pressure off yourself. No one presentation is going to make or break anything. People are understanding. You have sat and listened to presentations where the speaker is nervous, where they haven't been pitch perfect, where they haven't been awesome, but the information has been great. Do you think any less of them? No. So take the pressure off yourself is my first tip. Take the pressure off. I also want to acknowledge how much you're working on it. The very fact that you're listening to this podcast and working on building your speaking skill is like that. There's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot of people who don't. There's a lot of people that don't. The other thing that I want to say is trust that you know your stuff and stop focusing so much on the perfect words and focus on connection. One of the things that I say in my corporate workshops, in fact, I have a series of slides that talks people through this, is one of the biggest mistakes we make when we're presenting is that we prioritize content over connection. Imagine that written as a fraction, content over connection. And that is a mistake. Instead, when we're presenting, we should be prioritizing connection. What does our audience need from us right now? What does our listener want from us right now? And I'm going to tell you something. They don't want a word perfect presentation. They want your insights. They want your perspectives. They want your informed opinions. Now, when you reframe your presentations to focus on connection first, you stop focusing on being word perfect. And this is where I want to come back to this notion of my brain and my mouth just aren't in sync and the right words don't come out. When you focus on the essence, when you focus on the key messages, when you focus on connecting with your audience and helping them to understand something, well, it does a few things. It certainly calms down your nervous system, but two, it takes the pressure off the words. It takes the pressure off the words, and it takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure out of that unsync that's happening at the moment where your brain and your mouth don't align. The other piece here, and I think it's actually really important and it's explained beautifully in Adrian's question, is don't try to correct, because you're spot on. It's in the correction, that it's in the going back that you're fumbling over it and making it even worse. Trust that your listener, trust that your audience understands what it is that you're trying to say, even if it's not perfect. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know that I'm not speaking perfectly. In fact, I will often finish recording and go, oh, I don't really like how I explained all of that. But I've learned that that's just me holding myself to a really high expectation, and that my version of near enough still adds value, still communicates the message. And perhaps you've heard some of those episodes. Perhaps you've heard some of those ones that go, oh yeah, Kat was off her game, but yeah, it was still, I still got something. No one is expecting you to be a TEDx speaker or a Martin Luther King or a Barack Obama. In fact, any modern day politician like a Barack Obama, for example, when you hear him speak, he's using a teleprompter. And so it's a completely different essence. Don't use a teleprompter, by the way. It actually won't help you, because that there's a whole other skill set involved in reading a teleprompter well. So don't correct, just connect. Do you like that little rhyme? Don't correct, just connect, because connection is far more important than your content. Far more important than your content. And when you focus on connecting with your audience, when you focus on helping your audience, when you focus on taking your audience from where they are now to where you want them to be, rather than on delivering content perfectly, you will have a much better time, and you'll discover that it's actually not about whether you have a perfectly constructed sentence or whether you have the perfect words. The other thing that I want to say, and the reason I'm pausing is because there's some nerve stuff in here as well. One of the ways that we can calm our nerves is by focusing on the audience rather than focusing on us. Whenever I've taken a stage and been really focused on my presentation, been really focused on delivering certain pieces perfectly, that's when I've stuffed up. And it's also when I've been the most nervous, because I'm telling myself it's a performance that I'm unprepared for. Whereas when I focus on my audience, and I can literally do this, side stage, I can be standing there going, how can I be of most service to my audience? And it completely shifts. I get to have, sure, it's a one-way conversation, but I'm imagining them receiving what it is that I'm saying. I can see the body language or the nods or whatnot, or I can make that up if I'm recording something like a podcast where I can't see you listening. And when I focus on how can I be of service to my audience, I take the pressure off myself in terms of proving how much I know or proving how clever I am with words. And instead, I'm helping someone. I'm helping. And I'm helping them by sharing my experience, my expertise, my stories, my insights. So just to recap, prioritize connection over content. Focus less on the right words and more on what you want to say. And trust that you know your stuff. You wouldn't be talking about it if you didn't. You wouldn't be talking about it if you didn't. Trust that you know your stuff and that it's okay for it to come out however it comes out. It doesn't need to come out perfectly for people to benefit. If you have a question that you would like me to answer, or if you have a follow-up question to the question that I've just answered, please ask. You can do that by replying to one of my email newsletters. As I said, the link to subscribe to that is in the show notes. Or if you're more of an Instagram person, ask me on Instagram. You can find me at Cat Matson, and Cat is with a C. Cat Matson. It's a lovely, almost rhyming name. That's it for today. If you happen to be listening in real time, if you happen to be listening on release date, Wednesday, then tomorrow I'm hosting a elevator pitch practice session. The link for that is in the show notes, but I recognize that most people listen a little bit later. So nothing upcoming at the moment. But again, if you're on my email newsletter, then you get first heads up on anything that I'm doing. And all of the things that I do are always a lot of fun and well worth checking out. Alrighty. Thank you for the question, Adrian. I really appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Speaking with Confidence. In the meantime, remember to reach out to me with your questions on Instagram or replying to my email newsletters. And until I see you again, here's to confidence and here's to impact. I'll see you soon.